We need a bigger table.
Yes. I'll try not to go on your space.
I wish you drew a line.
Puts the thing down the middle.
I know you. Just like you drew a line. This is it right here.
Yeah.
It goes like this.
Okay, good morning. I would like to call this meeting to order. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater. I'm your chairperson today, and I'm joined on the board by Cynthia Stevens and Marcel Larendreau. Our city assessor today is Michael Taylor, and our admin secretary is Michelle Meepen. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. Statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And you can swear everybody in. Mr. Satowski, I think you're up first.
Do you swear? Can you state your full name, please? Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Can you state your full name, please? Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
They look different. Good morning, Mr. Taylor, and good morning, Mr. Sadowski. Whenever you're ready to proceed.
Sure. So the first one we have today is 925 Mills Drive. The roll number is 13000425600. File number is 19-2777. Proposed 2020 value is $2,694,000. Being valued as a retail warehouse here. One building on site being built in 2000. 20,916 square feet of leasable area. Owner-occupied building here. Quickly flipping to page 3. Page 3 just shows how the department arrived at $2,694,000 today. So essentially what we had broken down was we had 15,000 square feet being valued as a retail store, according to notes in our system, and the 5,916 being valued as a warehouse space. All the parameters below are based on retail warehouse. So that's how we got to that value. After going through this brief and trying to resolve the property with Mr. Sikowski, I did an on-site inspection and concluded that this property is actually a single-tenant warehouse, not retail. It has a retail component that is not different from other industrial warehouses owner-occupied that have kind of a retail storefront with minimal finish. So I do have a recommendation today to reduce the value to $2,493,000.
Thank you. Mr. Satowski?
So you're reducing it roughly by $200,000.
Yep.
And based on what parameters again?
Well, I have that information I can work up in my rebuttal to your evidence if we want to get to that point. But the parameters I used for my rebuttal package were, so I used the main floor area, which is 20,856 square feet.
Sorry, 20,000 how much?
20,856.
20,916.
916.
Where's that?
On your
On
page
your
3
page 3?
and page 4.
And page 4.
Page 1.
And page 1.
All of them.
20,916.
Your total? You got 15 and 5916. Total 20,000.
I've got too many different briefs here. Yeah, I'm using a new leasable area than that.
How did you arrive at that?
Well, if you're looking at that page 1, the plan area is 20,856.
Or you didn't go for the mezzanine.
I'll get to that. So 20,856. I use the rent of 772.
20,000.
Based on industrial rent, not what I have for my comparables. And then the mezzanine is 250 square feet, and that has a rent.
Sorry. Again, is the total area to 20,856? Then plus mezzanine, or
20,856.
that includes mezzanine?
No, that's just the ground floor area, like it says on page 1. And there's just a 250 square foot mezzanine space.
250.
Yeah.
What
Is
did
it the same rent?
No, it gets a rent of 532 square.
532.
Mr. Taylor, we chatted yesterday. I'm surprised that you didn't provide me those details yesterday.
You chatted yesterday. I said I had a number that wasn't different from the offer that you didn't accept. And
Well,
you gave me your position a month ago what you would accept. I did say that I did have a recommendation today at a number close to.
Well, no, you didn't say that you would have a recommendation. You said that you would have rebuttal evidence.
Yeah, I said all the information we provided in the rebuttal.
So, Mr. Satowski, do you want to accept this recommendation or not?
May I have
Do you want a moment to think about it?
May I have a few moments to think about? Maybe, if you don't mind, maybe having another property up here or another person up here.
No, we
Take
have
your
to
time.
finish this. So, do you want to
Well,
go
then,
through the-
then if we can go over the parameters, because so far we know that there are 20,856 square feet of ground floor space plus 215 square feet of mezzanine.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Madam
sure,
Chair, can you
yes.
have him put his presentation forward then? And then we
Sure.
can go to Mr. Suskowski, so
Sure,
we don't get this
go
all mixed
ahead.
up.
Well, I think he already has, but
Well, he hasn't done the
Well,
whole
he
you
thing.
want to go
hasn't-
through the whole
hasn't-
thing? Go ahead.
Yeah, go through the whole thing.
So after that, there's a vacancy of 4% for storage warehouses. Shortfall of 375 square foot.
375?
Yeah, expense allowance being 2% and the capitalization rate is 6%. To get to 2,493,000. That's the parameters.
That's the firm.
So you're
Okay.
using your cap rate from 6.15 to 6 in this case.
Well, after looking at the property, it's not a retail store. It's a warehouse.
Good. There's a
Like
retail-
even in your presentation, you're providing everything based on industrial parameters.
I accepting it? No, I'm not accepting it.
You're not accepting?
No.
Okay. In that case, did you want to say anything further,
No.
Mr. Taylor? Okay, thank you. Did you have questions, Mr. Satowski?
When was the last time this property was inspected? You said you inspected this property just recently. When was the last time this property was inspected?
Well, it was reviewed for 2020. I'm not sure when the last time it was, but it's been appealed since it was built by yourself. Pretty much every reassessment, so I'm not sure when this actually went out for those.
And you're aware that there was an agreement to reduce the assessment in 2018
Yep.
to $2,021,000.
Yep.
And was it inspected at that time?
I'm not sure.
And so you don't know what the basis of that reduction was?
The basis of that reduction was valuing it as a retail store split the way it was split.
So there was no change from the type of evaluation last time to
Well, there's a change not from 18 to 20, but there was definitely, it was valued as a warehouse up until about 2010, and then it flipped to retail for some reason.
And it was capped at that time at 6.5%, is that correct?
I have no idea.
So in general, when what are the parameters that are involved when you try to determine what the cap rate is? Age of the building, land to building ratio, the state of the building, is that correct?
Yeah.
So in this particular instance, if the cap rate was 6.5 last time around, the building's older, so you would reduce the cap rate, you don't increase the cap rate as the building ages?
But the 6.5% was based on something that I don't agree with.
You don't agree, even though there was an agreement that would have been signed off by management. Management would have, like I said, signed off on that agreement.
And
you don't
someone
agree-
would
you don't
review
agree
the
with
value that went out today that's under appeal. And I don't agree with how that was done either.
So you don't agree with it, but management, I guess there was a difference in opinion between you and management, is that correct?
I guess so.
Okay. So do you have rebuttal evidence that you're going to be presenting?
Yeah, I'll do that after you give your presentation.
Yeah.
So page 2 of your brief is no longer applicable?
Nope.
Page 3 is no longer applicable? Page 4 is no longer? None of the evidence in your brief is applicable then in this particular instance?
For the most part, no. Yeah, when I looked at the history and saw that it was a warehouse,
Madam
and then it
Chairperson.
shifted to retail and didn't make any sense.
He's provided us with verbal evidence, Mr. Satowski.
This is new evidence that will be submitted. It is being submitted to the board, and I've had no chance to review that evidence.
Well, he's given us a recommendation. He's allowed to do that.
But his evidence is new evidence.
It is not new evidence. He's giving a recommendation.
Based on new evidence.
He's done an inspection on the property. Did you have any further questions? No. Thank you. Questions?
Are you bringing us any information on your comparables for rents?
Comparables runs in our bottle package.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some comparables for
Oh,
rents.
so that's where it will be in your provided. I've got no further questions, so we see all the information.
So if you inspected the property, what's actually going on here? Obviously, there's maybe this appears to be a difference of opinion of what. So you've put it at you're saying it's an industrial warehouse now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's actually happening on the property?
Well, it's the
what
party
business?
stuff rental store
Okay.
where they rent out tables, chairs for banquets.
Okay. So they have a small front office.
They have a small office space. They have a storefront that would be akin to like a Dollarama or whatever, but the space itself could be taken over by a Dollarama or one of those kind of businesses. Really minimal retail finish. Really, they have like vinyl flooring, exposed steel joist roof kind of thing.
Okay.
So not high-end finishes for you'd see typically in retail. When they put my group together, I put 2 workups in here. I mean, I couldn't really wrap my head around why we would have a $10 and $5 rate for main floor space. It's real LV1. It's owner occupied. On inspection, they had like a large. They rented lots of glassware and dishes and stuff. So they have all like dishwashing, kind of like a banquet setup, laundry and dishes and all that stuff, and the loading docks to get the stuff kind of in and out.
This is just more for my edification, I think. So normally when you have a recommendation, don't you present it with your brief rather than put it in rebuttal?
Well, it's based on me going to the property after I'd submitted my brief.
But, okay.
It's a
Yeah.
catch-22.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stuck because originally I was going to be like,
Okay,
okay,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I'll go for an increase on this property if it's all retail, similar to other retail properties in that kind of St. James Fuller Park area, because $10 is pretty low for retail in that space, especially for a 2,000-liter built
And
building.
because the appellant had not seen your recommendation, you put it into the rebuttal rather than... Is that
Yeah,
why you
so
put it there? Okay.
yeah, there's a number there,
Okay.
a basis for it.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Mr. Satowski.
I'd like to refer to page 2 of my presentation, and my presentation is based on 3 arguments. The rent per square foot, the installment of the non-recoverable expenses of 5%, and cap rate of 7%. I use, based on those parameters, I arrive at a value of $1,307,000. And the rate that the rental rate that I use in this particular brief is $5.17 a square foot, and it's based on the industrial market rent comparables. Look on page 3, and the average of the rents on page 3 is $5.17 a square foot. So based on $5.17 a square foot, I arrive at a total potential market income of $108,136. And with respect to the non-recoverable expenses, again, do you want me to present rebuttal evidence to show how often the board had reinstated the 5% expenses? I know I asked this before.
That's right. No, we're well aware of the whole
Okay.
situation. Thank you.
And the cap rate, as I said, is 7%. I use 7%. The last in 2018, in order when we arrived at the agreement, the cap rate was at 6.5%. It was increased to 6.75%. But the main reason why I'm using the cap rate of 7% is based on page 4 of my brief, which shows that the average cap rate of industrial properties is 8.29. And since this building is somewhat older, since it's located in the Fuller Park area, I feel that a 7% cap rate would be more appropriate for this building. As a result, I arrive with those parameters. I arrive at a value of $1,307,000. Furthermore, on page 5, we have another cap rate study, which points out that by Cushman & Wakefield, the rates range anywhere from 6.5% to 7.75%. So my cap rate at 7% is right within that range. And by Colliers International, again, for investment grade properties, the rate ranges from 6 to 6.5%. Thank you. That's my view.
Thank you. Questions?
Have you inspected any of your rents comparables?
So, for example, 550 Century is located at Century and King Edward. It's located right at the forks of King Edward and Century. The average rent there is $725. So it's a two-story building. The second story is mainly composed of office space.
Sorry, my question was, did you inspect any of these?
I was that particular one, yes. Not inside, not the interior, but the exterior. If you want, I can go through all of these.
You know, it might just be easier to go through the rebuttal package for these questions, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you. Can we just want to have the panel ask the questions first?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Lorando?
I'm still looking, if you can go.
So have you been in this subject property?
Yes, I have.
You have, okay. And you stated earlier that the 2018 assessment was $2,021,000, and you're coming in almost.
Well, based on the parameters, based on the higher cap rate, the averaging rent $5.17. Yes, based on the parameters that I
So you
showed
think
earlier.
that was the assessment appealed last time?
It was, and an agreement was signed last night. Yes.
It was an agreement. So this is almost $1 million less.
Yes.
Okay, seems like a significant number. And you've based this on a retail warehouse parameters?
I based it on.
You did do it on industrial?
Industrial, because I include the
Okay.
industrial market rent
Okay.
comparables on page 2.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
So let me get this right. It was retail warehouse at the last assessment, correct?
That I cannot confirm what the assessor, what type of parameters the assessor used. He arrived at a value, and we agreed at the value at that particular time.
But you had appealed it.
It was an appeal, yes.
Yes, so when you appealed it, was it a retail at that time?
I'm sorry, I can't confirm one way or the other. I don't remember.
What was in the store? What was in the store?
Well, there was no change in the store. The store functioned the same as it's functioning
It was
today
the same function?
Yes.
It's been the same function since it was built?
for a very long time, yes.
I guess I'll have my questions for you after Michael. Go ahead.
Okay. And I have no questions. If you would like to provide us with a rebuttal. Pardon?
The number's still not the same.
What's that?
Well,
That's what it went on at, my recommendations.
Madam Chairperson, I'm going to have to object. This is new evidence.
If you would like to carry on with your rebuttal package.
Sure. So I'll have the panel, everyone flip to page 5, please. As it relates to Mr. Sikowski's rental comparables. A lot of the comparables he's listed, he's got 20 here. A couple of them are from the same property. Rebuttal is mostly that suggesting these are older, often multi-tenanted, large format industrial warehouses. We'll go through them one by one if needed. So 550 Century, and 117 King Edward. So that's comparables 1 and 6. So yeah, there's 3 buildings there. I've been fully through the building. I did the 2012 board revision hearing on that property. The rents range from $650 to $14. So Mr. Sikowski's provided comparables again, 2,835 square feet at 725, and then 4,480 at 725 also. Generally, the lower rents at this property are for second floor tenancies. Comparable number 2, as you can see, this single tenant, owner-occupied property. I don't know where you got the 454 from. Built in 1965, much older than 2000. Comparable number 3, 1450 Mountain, built in 1977. We got total square footage there. I don't need to go through each one of these, really. Actually, I didn't see anything as being fully comparable to the subject property that we're looking at here. Most of them, like I said, are much older than the subject, not in as good a location, and multi-tenant or have very large industrial operations within the property, which the subject does not have. If you flip back to the very end of this rebuttal package, it's going to keep it light, so it'll be page 15 and 16. Since I changed the landscape format for the subject property photographs, I renumbered them. So page 1 is just the outside, if you're looking at the parking lot as you're pulling into the site.
Sorry, what page are you on?
It would be page 16, but it's number 2.
Your rebuttal?
In the rebuttal package, yeah.
I will have.
Near the back.
Near the back, so. So again, you can kind of see the storefront, which is uncommon for industrial properties. And we have the 2 loading docks, one's at grade and the other one's sunken dock. We have pictures of these storefronts there, some with the drop ceiling, some with the exposed HVAC system, vinyl flooring. As I suggested in my presentation, so it's minimal finish. Looking through those pictures. Picture of the office space. And then we got the much larger warehouse space in the back. The end of the subject property. Again, just supporting valuation as an industrial warehouse. As you can see, it's in good condition. The owner said there was no problems with roof leaking or floor heaving or any other structural problems with the building. And I asked them if you were to market the site, if you'd be marketing it as retail operations or as industrial. He said likely to be marketed if you're selling as industrial property. So. But yeah, going back, as this is rebuttal to your rental comparables, I mean, I've been in the majority of these places, and I do not think they're comparable. My question to you earlier was whether you'd gone through the inside of any of these.
No, I haven't.
No. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Stokowski, did you have any questions?
So with respect to your rebuttal package here, so on page 3, your total expenses that you showed are 2%, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And you calculated this at 6%.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Narandi?
So is this a change now going, because we're going from retail to warehouse?
Yep.
So is this a permanent change that you've made, or?
Yes.
So you've changed it to that? Your 772, where do you get that from in your comparables that you have on your page 2?
The 772, so like the page 2 comparables, those
Yeah.
are all industrial comparables in the neighboring area.
Is 772 an average, is it
No, it's modeled.
a model?
But the model generated a 772 that fits within this range for market rents.
For storage warehouse?
For storage warehouses that are newer in stock in the area.
I thought storage warehouse, you didn't put a fee in for the mezzanine. No, correct?
Usually still put
Yeah.
it, but they don't. Yeah.
Well, what are you using for your, again, that's just model because you don't have it in your comparables.
Yeah. It's usually a marginal rate like that, so it's $5. I mean, it's really giving you a potential rent of $1,330, so it's,
That's minimal, but what is that area used for, just storage, or?
yeah, it's just open.
I didn't see any pictures of it.
No, the only picture I really had, I would take a good picture when I was up there, but you can see the stairway to it on one of the pictures, on page 11, the second page 11. And it's small, it's 250 square feet, so.
Not really valuable.
No, it's not that cool. It does have value, but,
Your cap rate, you're using a cap rate from your first sheets then, correct? So you're 6?
Yep.
Which one are you using for this now? You pulled it out of retail, you've got
No, it's
industrial?
not industrial. Everything's industrial now.
So
In my
you put it at 6% now?
Correct.
So which one are you using it as? It's industrial A or B?
It would just be single tenant A.
Single tenant A?
Yep.
In your 20th percentile, the lowest is 6.34 and highest 7.80. What brings it under the 6.34?
I can't really comment on that because I'm not in the industrial section, so I'm not sure why all these numbers are the same in their tables. Otherwise, I would be able to answer your question.
So you don't know the age variance, the height?
Well, I do have, like I worked in the industrial section for many years
Yeah.
leading up to this. That's why I have so much experience with these comparables. But for this reassessment, I don't know what they're doing specifically. But yeah,
What are the heights of the ceiling in this industrial?
in the industrial,
In this one?
in this one,
What are the heights of the ceiling?
18 feet.
18 feet clear throughout the whole building?
There are some posts, but it's almost clear span construction. Yeah.
And it's all 18 except for underneath that 250 square feet with the mezzanine in.
Yeah.
Storage docks are,
There's one grade and one sunken building.
so one grade, one sunken.
Yeah.
Year 2000. No, if you look at your industrial A's, they can go as low as 5.5
Yeah.
to as high as 9.80.
Yep.
Give me something on the, what would drive it down to that low of
That's
5.5 or 6?
It's in a good location. Built in 2000. There's nothing suggesting it would be below average.
And you're saying this is above average?
Yep.
I've got no further questions.
Thank you. I think all my questions were just answered. Thank you.
So, just for clarification, the last time the cap rate was 6.5?
Yep.
But
Do you-
as a,
It was as
Yes.
a retail
Right.
operation. I can't remember which reassessment it changed from industrial to retail. I think it was 2010 or 2012.
Do you have, like, the age breakdown for the cap rates for industrial? That's all my questions.
For this type of building, what is the normal land to building ratio?
For this type of building, storage warehouse would be 4:1.
And this is around 2 to 1, and you reduce the cap rate to 6%,
Yep.
even though the norm is 4 to 1.
For land to building ratio, that's the average, yeah.
Thank you. Did either of you have a wish for a summation? Thank you. That's- sorry, I'm just going to ask, sir, could you put your phone on, please? Thank you.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good morning, Mr. Newman.
Morning, Pam.
We are moving on to 850 Regent West. Mr. Taylor, whenever you are ready.
All right, so file number is 19-1620, roll number 09007-556-000. 850 Regent Avenue West, post 2020 evaluation is $5,035,000. 2 different buildings on site, 3 different units. 1 building built in 1993, the other one built in 2006. We have leasable area today, we're looking at 25,097 square feet. Subject property leases are on page 2, along with the fact they've complied with sending in the income expense questionnaire for 2017. Some rental comparables on page 3 that support the model rents on page 4. But the model rents on page 4 are really close to what the subject's actually receiving. In fact, there's an override rent on one of the places at $19.50 a square foot on page 4. The second one, the Giant Tiger space, is applied a model rent of $10.01 a square foot, even though they're receiving $9.75. And the other space is getting a model rent of $22.76, even though they're getting a rent of $23. Standard parameters for neighborhood shopping center are applied, so 4% for vacancy, expenses being 2%, shortfall being $8, and there's a cap rate applied of 7.15% to get to that $5,035,000. Page 7 just shows an aerial photograph of the subject property. Through the Giant Tiger at the back, and the 2 smaller units at the front in that other building. And the building in the front used to be the Blockbuster Video there. Mark and I did this property last reassessment too, so shouldn't be anything too crazy here. That's it for my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Newman?
Yes, thank you. Your comparables on page 3, the first 5, 1570, 1580, 1592, 1586 Regent,
Yep.
those are all Crossroads Shopping Center,
Yep.
correct? As is 1565. Sorry, 1565 is Kildonan Market, correct?
Yes.
All right. So going to your page 4, everything there is model driven, correct?
Correct.
Your 2% allowance is $7,511, correct?
Yep.
And we've got 2 buildings, so we've got 2 roofs. We've got approximately 25 square feet of roofs, correct?
Yes.
The capitalization rate of 7.15%, model driven.
Yep.
Let me ask you a question. Sometimes I see properties that are classified as retail. And when I see retail, I see a cap rate of 7.75%. What's the difference between retail and neighborhood shopping center?
Retail should be just used for properties you see along the older retail storefronts. You'll see along major thoroughfares like Main Street, Henderson Highway, where it's just street parking in the front, maybe a couple spaces in behind. We've gone over this, Mark.
Going to your page 5, that's the chart of capitalization rates. And in the retail section, this is a neighborhood, and the city's information says that the 20th percentile is 7.15%.
Correct.
So that means that 80% of the properties are poorer than those at 7.15%.
Yep.
Now, let's go to page 7, your photos. So this property has two buildings, as you've noted, building at the back, truly at the back of the site, right up against the property line, building at the front. The building at the back is about 18,000 square feet, so 75% of the leasable area of this property is at the rear of the site. Agreed?
Yep.
Do 80% of the properties that are neighborhood shopping centers have 75% of their leasable area at the very back of the site?
Usually neighborhood shopping centers have a variety of different buildings on site, yes.
But do 80% of them have 75% of their leasable area at the rear property line with a building out front?
They sometimes do, Mark.
And if we look again at your page 7, the photos.
Yep.
So at the bottom photo, there's a property to the left of the subject, and that property will obscure the visibility of the subject's site, correct?
Correct.
And when we look at your top photo, we see to the left of the subject the hydro substation. Then to the left of that, there's a lot which has got what is a bicycle or a walking path through it.
Yep.
Are you aware that immediately adjacent to that, a 5-story hotel, Best Western, has just been built?
Yep.
Okay. And that's going to further obstruct the view of the subject property, correct?
I don't believe that far down the road it would object.
Okay.
Obstruct the view. I did forget to touch on the other income. Sorry, let me just jump back in on page 4.
Yeah.
There's a line for additional income there, 65,000.
And the 7.15% is the capitalization rate. That's selected by the model?
Yep.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Londo?
So what is the other income?
That income's just from the Canadians. It's lumped in. I believe it was included. We've had other Canadians' properties. So it was taken out of the valuation on the other one. I just want to make sure that's actually appropriate.
Sorry?
Last cycle, when we looked at it and they had the other income added in, remember? We looked at the Canadians Transcona adjacent to the, and made sure the numbers matched up.
They do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what that is?
Yeah.
Is that for parking then?
Yes.
Because they're using part of the parking in Canadian site?
Yep.
Most of their.
But they own this site too, so it's just kind of a line item.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure it was consistent. We didn't actually talk about that before.
I'm good.
So the effective age on this is 1993 to 2006, so that's quite a range. Is that the difference between the two buildings on site?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I mentioned.
Oh, you
that.
might have, I might have missed it, sorry.
Yeah, the 1993 building's the front, the former Blockbuster Video site, and then 2006 is the Giant Tiger.
Giant Tiger is it, okay. And you said that there was, on page 4 on your workup, you said there was an override on the rent. That was on the 1950, was that an override to make it actual?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Did you have a chance to inspect this property?
Yes.
In and out? Thank you, that's all my questions. Mr. Newman?
So, 3 issues for you to deal with. The first one is the gross potential income. The difference is not that large, and I'll take you to that. There's the 5% non-recoverable issue. I'm going to mention it at this point. I'll deal with it in a more detailed way in one of the appeals that's going to come along shortly. Mr. Taylor for sure has heard it. I think, Mr. Lorendo, you're the only one who hasn't heard it from me, and the others have. So I'll do abbreviated, but I'll do it on the next one. But it is an issue in relation to this property as well. And then finally, we have the issue of the capitalization rate. So in terms of the gross potential income, following the text of my brief, So the text goes on for 4 pages, and then following that, you've got a series of attachments which precede tab 1. So page number 1 in the lower right-hand corner was the actual calculation of the assessment. And then there is my calculation of value at $4,428,000. The differences between what I've done and what the assessor has done is essentially, it's the gross potential income. The assessor's at $323,501. I'm at $319,397. A chunk of that is the giant tiger space. The model puts it at $10.01. The actual is $9.75 with a lease done in February of 2017. And accordingly, I'm going to suggest to you that that's market for a building like that is at the very rear of the property. The Care Plus, we're the same at $19.50, and then on the credit union space, I've got 23, and the model was at $22.76. But at the end of the day, we've got a difference on the gross potential income of approximately $4,000. I've got a 6% vacancy. I've gone slightly higher. This property has a long history of vacancy. The former Blockbuster space was vacant for years and years. The 75% of the square footage, which I'll address in a more detailed way in a moment, is at the rear of the property. And I'll suggest that creates other potential issues. Shortfall is the same. I've got 5% in there on the additional non-recoverables. There's 25,000 square feet of roofs here. If you have to replace those roofs at, say, $12 a square foot, you're looking at $300,000. Even if you amortize that over 25 years, that's $12,000 a year. The allowance for 2% is $7,511. It's not enough. There's significant parking areas here. I know the city uses $3 a square foot on asphalt, and that would turn into $225,000 based on the land-to-building ratio, which would turn into another $11,000 a year. So now I'm at $23,000 just on the roofs and the parking lot before I get to other regular structural, 2 buildings, not 1. So again, I'm going to have much more to say later on another property about the 5%, but I'm just saying to you conceptually, the 2% is not enough. And then the $65,000 that Mr. Taylor has spoken about is included in my revenues. And so I get to a net operating income of $332,000 compared with the assessors $360,000. So that's the major difference in our NOI and where it's coming from. And then we've got the capitalization rate. So on the capitalization rate, the model says that the 20th percentile, so the 20% best properties should get a capitalization rate of 7.15%. The 80% properties should get a capitalization rate of 7.3%. This property is unique, I suggest to you. You can see from the photos that 75% of the leasable area truly is right up against the rear property line. It's got visibility issues. It's not easy to see. And that's a very deliberate decision on that retailer who is prepared to take cheaper space because it fits their business model. But having said that, when you compare it to other neighborhood shopping centers, I suggest to you that this property is not better than 80% of the neighborhood shopping centers. It is poorer because of the configuration of the property and the fact that 75% of the space is at the very rear. I think a higher capitalization rate is appropriate because of that on a comparative basis, and I've selected the 7.5% in that regard, and subject to questions, those are my submissions.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Taylor?
Just keeping on that cap rate, so the 20th to 80th percentile is like the average. We touched on the 7.15 to 7.3. You're saying it's below average because there's the store at the back of the site?
Yeah.
Okay. That was my question.
Thank you. Mr. Larondo?
Why are you going with the vacancy at 6 versus the model? at 4?
Because of the historic vacancy issues on the property associated with the Blockbuster space, plus as well if the rear space ever goes vacant, I think it'll be very difficult to lease up.
Is the history in here on the vacancy?
It is not. And there's no vacancy in the most recent cycle. The history was, though, that the Blockbuster building, the front building, stayed vacant through 2 or 3 cycles.
Where is the history? Is it in here?
And it's not in here.
So, what was the history?
The history was that the Blockbuster building,
Yep.
which is round numbers, 7,000 square feet,
Yep.
was vacant. Well, Blockbuster went down, as I recall, in 2006, 2007-ish, and then it stayed vacant until the most recent tenants went in there, that are there now. So, it was vacant for 7 or 8 years, and chronic vacancy was applied on historic assessments of this property.
And they went in when?
The present tenants went in 2015,
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
So, does that not say the chronic is gone?
I accept that the chronic is gone, but what I'm saying to you is there continues to be a risk with that rear space, that if it comes vacant, it's going to be difficult to lease. And so I nudged the vacancy slightly.
No further questions?
That was my question too, was about the vacancy, and I think you've answered, so I'm good, thank you.
My only question is, did you have a chance to inspect the property?
I have been in this property, yes.
Thank you. Did either of you have a wish for a summation on this?
I might have one more question. Have you ever done a direct comparison on this property for evaluation?
I have not.
Okay. We're just moving along. Very well done, Madam Chair. Next. I just keep wanting to jump in on it.
I'll hold you down. Good. I have a sharp pen.
Good.
Okay, 1076 Main, Mr. Taylor, whenever you're ready.
Phone number is 1409381240. File number is 19-1790, 1076 Near Avenue. I have a recommendation today to reduce the value to $3,233,000.
Could you repeat that?
Sorry.
$3,233,000.
And that's based on?
These no adjustments to the rents and cap rate.
Sorry, and the cap rate?
Yeah.
So you're taking the cap rate from,
This one was blended at 7.3. If you're looking at page 6. And we're running it at 7.5. Because really that VSG component got a cap rate of 5.55 because it's not the big model looks at as if it's on its own. It's a small footprint, so we're tapping that one out.
You're bringing the cap rate up to 7.5.
The blended cap rate here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, also the rents?
And the rents. We're looking at using actual rents
You're using actual rents now.
in the recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Newman?
That's acceptable.
Thank you. Sorry, just for the record, Mr. Taylor,
Sorry.
what are the actual rents?
On this one? They're on page
See the
2.
number.
Do you have a workup of the rec?
No.
No.
Sorry, did I read your question?
He said he was going to make a better talk on the 5% on this one.
No, sorry, I'll do it on the next one.
On that side.
I'll do it on 875 St. James.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's what,
Okay, I didn't realize you.
I just didn't see your name there.
Yes, I
Yeah.
understand.
I'm just trying to confuse it.
Going to move on to 1076 Narren.
You just
No,
did that.
875 St. James.
875 St. James, thank you.
You have to swear in the whole crew.
Yeah, for every $3.5 million a difference, we bring an extra person.
Is that it?
Good thing they didn't come in at 40, otherwise our office would be empty. So, yeah,
Can you state your full name, please?
Justin Zernowski,
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you
I
God?
do.
Ladies first. Next, state your full name, please. Diane Shimon. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do.
Sandy Shimelman.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. And can you state your full name, please?
Alexander Eckman.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Everybody?
So that the panel is not overly concerned, it's not the intention to have all of these individuals give evidence generally. They're available to answer whatever questions may arise. That's why they've been sworn in. I'll generally be making the presentation.
Roll number is 130-961-95800. File number is 19-2016, 875 St. James Street. The proposed 2020 reassessment value is $32,222,000. We have 150,788 square feet leasable area. I won't go over too much in my presentation. Essentially, we had this property in a hearing, I feel like only like 6-7 months ago, for 2018, 2019. There's 7 or 8 municipal board appeals filed on the 16, 18, 19 levels of value, so I'm just going to jump right to the point on page 3. Shows the work up to the $32 million value. So all mall driven except for we've applied an override on the vacancy allowance for the one vacant unit there, so allowing 10% vacancy. And yes, a cap rate of 6.15%. Thank you.
I'll try to be as brief as Mr. Taylor. So,
think it's possible.
I don't think so.
Right.
But let's try and help the panel. As you've noted, this property has been in appeal before, and you're right that we were here back in May of this year dealing with the 2018-19 supplementary. So the history of the property, this is the Target store that was built on the old Winnipeg Stadium site, correct?
Yeah.
And it's a building that is somewhat unique from a retail perspective in the sense that it is not at grade.
Right.
It is up in the air, and in fact, although and so it's up in the air. The floor space is really at the second level, and beneath that floor is parking.
Yep.
So our task, the board's task, is to determine what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller at April 1 of 2018 for this property. Agreed?
Sure.
Target opened sometime in 2014, and by April of 2015 was closed. And so by the time we get to April 1 of 2018, the property has been 100% vacant for 3 full years.
Yep.
And at April 1 of 2018, in a general sense, is it fair that the world of retail is undergoing significant changes?
Sure.
Is it fair to say that there have been closures of a large number, significant number of stores?
Yep.
The nearest one probably is the Sears store at Polo Park, which closed.
Yes.
And Sears stores across the city closed and across the country closed. And I won't take you through all of this, but we agree that the retail market has changed substantially over the years, and by April 1 of 18, that has truly accelerated.
Yep.
Online shopping is contributing to that in a significant way.
I'll let you infer whatever you want, Mark.
All the Target stores in Winnipeg closed, agreed?
Yep.
So 150,000 square feet approximately, this building. All loading is not at grade. Trucks have to go up a ramp in order to load, correct?
I got pictures of it.
Building has escalators and elevators, so any customers coming to the building, they can't walk in. They have to go up either an elevator or an escalator, and similarly with their purchases, they have to come down an elevator or an escalator. Very unusual in the retail world.
I guess so.
This property is classified as a retail warehouse.
Yep.
Agree with me that in the city of Winnipeg, there are no retail warehouses at second floor level.
That's correct.
The only retail that exists in the city of Winnipeg at second floor level is an enclosed shopping mall.
Yep.
The value calculation found on page 3 of your brief, is it all model driven?
Yep.
Is the 10% vacancy model, or is that an override?
I presented it as an override.
And at April 1 of 18, it's been 100% vacant for 3 full years. So why is it only a 10% override and not higher?
It was the opinion of the assessor that was on.
Is that you or somebody else?
Somebody else.
Do you agree with me that in the past, the city has allowed a 25% vacancy?
On chronically vacant buildings, yes.
On this one?
On this one, I believe so, but as I said earlier, everything's under appeal regardless, so.
But it's the city that allowed the 25% previously, is the point I'm making. Agreed?
Yes.
The rents, again, they're all model driven. And you've got a set of comparables on page 2 of the brief. And these are all various retail outlets in the area, correct? Every one of them is at grade.
Yep. We did everything with this balance.
We did. maybe we should just bring the video in and replay
I got a
it.
big TV there. so-
There you go, all right. But this is for the benefit of the panel, who didn't sit on this matter 5 or 6 months ago. So, and in terms of the space of all of your comparables, would you agree with me that 1450 Ellis is the only one that is similar in size to any of the units in the subject?
Sure.
So that's 47,847 square feet. That was the Sears home store. That's gone, it's disappeared, hasn't it?
Yeah.
All of the other comparables you've utilized are smaller in size.
As you can see from there, we went over this 5 months ago. Generally, there's not much of a economies of scale applied when you're in that size of space. It's not the same as when you're looking at 5,000 square feet to 40 or 50,000 square feet.
But my point is simply they are all smaller.
Yeah, that's the largest one on the page, yeah.
They are all at grade.
Yes.
None of them have escalators and elevators.
No.
The shortfall, which appears on page 3 of your brief,
Yep.
at $6 a square foot.
Yep.
That is drawn from the model, but I gather it's drawn from retail warehouse buildings.
Correct.
And since none of them, let me rephrase, since all of them are at grade, and therefore none of them will have elevators or escalators, the subject will have different costs than the comparables will, that from which the $6 is taken.
Yes.
And let's look at your page 3 again. The 2% expense allowance is $42,288.
Yep.
Do we agree that we'll have approximately 150,000 square feet of roof on this building?
Yes.
Do we agree that we're going to have, in the neighborhood, I'll suggest, of 200,000 square feet of paving on this site?
Yep, around that.
Page 4, the capitalization rate chart. Where in the chart of retail does this property fall? Which category?
It's not on the chart.
Are there in fact any transactions of retail warehouse properties the city can point to?
You're asking me to point to something right now? No.
I'm just asking you if you're aware of any retail warehouse transactions.
That sold for capitalization rates?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe there were some.
Are you aware of them as you're sitting here?
I don't know addresses, no.
Look at your page 24. So page 24 is part of an additional section. If we go back to page 21, this is the additional information the city's been filing with all of its briefs as part of the 2020 cycle, correct?
Yep.
And if we go to page 24, there is some additional cap rate information. When we look at that chart, 1271 Jefferson, would you agree that that is the closest comparable to the subject property?
It's just that none of these are comparable to the subject property.
None of them are comparable.
No.
Okay.
You can suggest that it's comparable if you want to.
Thank you. 1271 Jefferson, what is that property? Do you know?
I'm not sure right now.
So 61,000 square feet, certainly it's the largest of the properties that are listed there, and the capitalization rate was 7.4%, correct?
Correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miranda?
No income statements on this property?
No, I don't believe I did. Include the income expense. I think that was post-reference. I think the tenancies moved in after April 1, which is why we issued a sub and had the hearing 5 months ago.
I think that was good.
Nope,
I missed that one.
you missed that one. You might have been on one of the earlier ones. And we likely will be back in 5 months for the pad site you guys are building.
And this is the entire site that we're looking at, correct? We're not just looking at this building. Is it not the entire pad site that you were evaluating it?
No, we aren't looking at that.
What are you looking at?
We're only looking at a portion of it. Basically everything you see on my page 6.
On your page 6?
Yeah.
So basically the building.
Just building in the parking lot, yeah. This roll number, the other stuff's on a separate roll number. And then page 7, you can see where the pad site's going in. For the P.F. Chang restaurant.
And that doesn't fall into this one?
No, it's not done yet.
That one will be separate.
Yeah. March, April.
You've got it as retail, but in your pictures, is this not a call center?
Yep, there's call center and there is the Winners Home Center.
And what kind of rents do you get for call centers? You have, none of your comparables have that.
No.
Do you have any comparables for the call center?
No.
Do you have any comparables, anything in your comparables showing us rents for winners throughout the city? There are a number of other winners.
There's 600 Empress, which is the Marshalls.
I got no further questions.
So the override for the vacancy, the space that was vacant, was that the call center space?
There's still one of the units that's vacant.
Oh, there still is a unit vacant. Okay. So the call center and Winners were leased up for the date, but not, so how big is the space that's vacant then?
The call center and the Winners are both post-reference.
They're both post, oh, they're both are,
April 1,
okay.
2018, the whole building, while it was under construction and demising into these 3 units.
Okay.
Yeah. Physically, as of January 1, 2020, it's going to be 3 units.
Okay. And currently there is one space vacant?
Currently, there's still 1 space vacant.
Okay.
Currently, there's still 3 units.
Okay. And your cap rate, so this was modeled, so taking some of the uniqueness of that building into account, the model's not looking at that, yeah, okay. Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
My questions have been asked and answered. Mr. Newman?
Thank you. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through our income approach on this property. We will have some rebuttal relating to the comparables, which we will provide to you, which I will provide to you in the course of doing that. But so what I'm going to start first is with this document. There's a companion document that comes with it, which is a set of appendices, and I'm going to make reference to those as I go through this as well.
Is it the smaller one than you're doing now?
That's right. So the smaller one is the submission, so to speak, and the larger one are the appendices. That document, Mr. Laurendeau, is included in the package of material here. So you've actually picked that from one of the properties that I had in appeal, but it's the same document that you will find in this package of materials, and I am going to speak to it. So, much of what is happening in relation to this property is not in dispute. If we go to the submission at page 2, we have a description of the property, and we start to talk about its construction. An unusual property in the sense that you don't find retail except in enclosed shopping malls at the second floor level, which is what happened here. Mr. Schindelman will tell you that when Target came here and they built, it's like they were coming from a foreign land. They had no clue what might happen in Winnipeg. Some say they had no clue about retailing in Canada either, but that's a different problem. Because when they built this site, for example, all of the parking underneath the building, which is concrete, has no reinforcing steel in it. Who builds parking lots, who builds concrete in Winnipeg without reinforcing steel? Target does. Our driveways, your approach to your driveway, all of that has reinforcing steel. This parking lot underneath the building, about 150,000 square feet, does not have reinforcing steel. It's going to create issues. They also built in the winter. There was frost in the ground. That created additional problems and will create future problems, which will tie into the non-recoverables, which I will address. Because the parking is covered, it creates a need to continuously light that area underneath the building, which creates additional cost in terms of operating the property. It also creates security issues because there are all sorts of street people who are in and out of this property on an ongoing basis. Over onto page 3, we talk about the dry sprinkler system there. They put a system there that is badly installed. It continuously freezes. It needs to be maintained. It is very susceptible to variations in temperature, and as recently as the middle of November, when we had variations in temperature, it froze again, and every time it freezes, it creates issues, and the sprinklers come on, and alarms get activated, and it's an ongoing problem. The neighborhood, obviously, is a neighborhood that historically has been a focus of significant retail in the city, but that is changing. It is changing in the sense that retail has migrated to the south, to the Seasons area on Kenniston and Sterling Lion Parkway. You've got IKEA, you've got the various stores on the south side of Sterling Lion, and of course you've got the large Seasons development with all that it has on the north side of Sterling Lion. The other thing the Seasons development has immediately adjacent to it is a very large pool of apartment building construction, and what they are doing is they are bringing residents to the merchants. Attempts are being made to do that in the Polo Park area as well, for two reasons. One, the demand for retail simply is not there anymore, and you are seeing very large landlords in this country, RioCan, for example, a very large REIT. They are repositioning many of their shopping malls to turn them into mixed-use properties because they are all suffering significant vacancy with the demise of many retailers, which I'll detail in greater detail in a moment. But also the online shopping is taking a lot of people out of the stores and very much reducing the square footage that the retailers need or want or can afford. So, as I said, attempts are being made in the Polo Park area to get rezoning put in place to allow residential, and it's a matter of controversy right now with the airport, who are resisting it for their own reasons. So, the other thing that happened when this space got reconfigured, if we turn to page 4, and on to page 5 and 6, when this space got reconfigured, you can see the areas that are highlighted in pink. Those areas all became common areas, and they now had to be available in order to provide the appropriate safety exits, and it has reduced the efficiency of the building, and you've got substantial areas totaling over 16,000 square feet that are now devoted to common areas for the building and are no longer leasable. Those areas are still included within that 150,000 square feet. They ought not to be, but we tell you this so you will understand what the reconfiguration of this building has necessitated. It wasn't designed for multiple tenants, and they had to do these things in order to make it usable. So if we then continue on, we come to our valuation on page 7, and essentially what we have done, and we didn't need to do this, I will say frankly, to be crystal clear on this, at April 1 of 2018, this building was 100% vacant and had been for 3 years. Subsequent to that, some of the space became occupied. It became occupied by renters. It became occupied by a call center. And we have assigned rents to this space. These rents, I will say to you bluntly, are more than generous in terms of what the landlord can actually get. Significant inducements were provided, but that's what we've used, and it leads ultimately to a blended rate of $12.84, $1,944,000 of gross potential income, and that is obviously a significant difference between we and the assessor. The assessor is at $2,349,000, so we've got a difference of almost $400,000 of gross potential income. Then we come to the question of the vacancy. We have used 20%. I will say to you, I think we easily could have used 25%. We could have used more. I will show you shortly that the city has in the past, on its own, assigned a 25% vacancy to this space. To assign a 10% vacancy to this space in light of the history, in light of what was present at April 1 of 2018, 100% vacant, in other words, is too low. I appreciate that it was overridden, not by the assessor who's in the room today, but by someone else. And I say to you, and I'll show you in a few moments, the city has assigned 25% vacancy in the past at an April 1, 2016 value date. And of course, by the time we get to 2018, it's 2 more years, 100% vacant. The shortfall, we are at $8 a square foot. The city is at $6. The difference in part is the fact that this is now a multi-tenant building. It's got significant common areas. It's got significant lighting obligations associated with the covered parking. It's got security issues associated with the covered parking. The shortfall is going to be higher. The model shortfall of $6 is driven from RWC properties, all of which are at grade. The subject is not, so it is different, and accordingly an additional allowance is appropriate for shortfall. The non-recoverables, we are showing 5%, and I'm going to come in a detailed way to that in a couple of minutes. And then there's the additional 2% for non-recoverables. The capitalization rate, we're utilizing 88%. 6.15% is not something that appears on the assessor's chart for RWC properties. Bluntly, if any one of you were a buyer of this property at April 1 of 2018, 100% vacant for 3 years continuously at that point in time, 150,000 square foot of retail on, as we like to call it, on stilts at a second floor level with a deteriorating, rapidly deteriorating economy in the context of retail, you would view this property as bearing significant risk, and I do not think you would treat it as you would any other RWC property. You would assign a much higher capitalization rate to it. If we go to page 8 of our materials, you see our set of comparables for various properties in the area and in the city more generally. Many of them are large square footages. You can see, if you look at them, the only one that starts with a 14 is the 1485 Portage Sport Check. That's located in Polo Park. So obviously that's a very different site But what that tells you is that a business located in the top shopping center, top regional mall in the city, is only paying $14, and that's why I say to you that our use of $14 is more than generous in terms of what we've done. If you look at other large spaces, you can see rents ranging from a low of $7 in a couple of the spaces to a high of $10, $12. The Grant Park Shopping Center site, 86,000 square feet, the former Target. It got converted. Canadian Tire went into there at $7 a square foot. So that tells you to some extent what the market was for vacant Target space. It was difficult to lease up. They got lucky at Grant Park because it was at grade. The floors could support the load, the weight of the products that Canadian Tire sells. This facility, its floor loads could not support anything like that, and that contributed to the difficulties and the ongoing difficulties in leasing up the space. We then have pictures of all of the comparables at the following pages to assist you in understanding them. You see at page 12 the Grant Park Shopping Center space that was taken over by Canadian Tire. You see in the lower photo on that page the automotive center they were able to put in at that site. Of course, at this site, you couldn't have an automotive center as part of the building footprint. At page 13 in the top photo, you see the Sport Check facilities, which is part of Polo Park. And you see a variety of these other spaces as well, all of which leads us to the conclusion that in using the rents we have used, as I say, I think we have been more than generous with the rents we have used, and indeed overly so. On the vacancy issues, as the assessor has acknowledged, there has been great difficulties experienced in the retail world. Page 19 touches on the Target stores going vacant, which dropped 500,000 square feet of space into the Winnipeg market. Future Shop, Office Depot, Safeway, and Sobeys, because of their merger, a number of stores got closed. Toys R Us has been struggling. Significant vacancy, and I'm going to come to a little bit more detail in the appendices, but on page 20 you can see a listing of the various stores that have gone bankrupt and or closed. All of the Sears stores listed at the bottom, including Polo Park, which remains vacant to this day. So lots of issues. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And then if we go to page 21, what we're showing you there is the history of the vacancy in the property, 100% as of 2015, 100% in 16, 100% in 17. 18, it's shown at 83.92%. To be clear, that's a function of the fact that subsequent to the reference date of April 1, 18, some of the space became occupied, but also a significant portion of it to this day is not yet paying rent, because the deal that Winners has made is until that third space is leased, they do not pay base rent. So they're covering some of the cost associated with the property, but they're not paying any base rent. Shortfall, page 22, I've touched on this a little bit already, but we see a variety of photos. This building was badly built by Target. There are ongoing problems with pipes that are bursting. You've got very large stairwells. They need to be properly secured. You see the photos of leakage, burst pipes, burst sprinklers. The roof, we don't know what Target was thinking when they brought in this roof they brought in. We believe it's a single ply roof. You can see in the lower photo on page 24, it has wrinkled. This is going to feed into my non-recoverables, which I'll get to in a couple of moments, but it's going to require a significant expenditure to address it. You can see more photos of issues relating to the roof on 25. 26, we get into some of the issues in the I was going to say underground, under building parking, which is at grade, and you can see some photos of that on page 27 as well. So that then brings us to the issue of the non-recoverables. And at this point, what I want to do is I want to take you into our appendices. And in particular, there is a tab which has the words non-recoverable expenses. Probably it's actually, there's numbered tabs which are part of that. It's the tab immediately preceding the numbered tabs in the appendix, Mr. Lowe, right? So if you find the number 1 and the pages prior to that are the actual non-recoverable expense submission. And I'm not going to go through the entirety of this. What I'm going to tell you is that on pages 75 through 81, you've got a summary of what's found in all of the attachments. And there are quotes from various authorities, and what we have done is we have gone and we have looked at the appraisal of real estate in Canada and what they have to say. We've gone to the Sauder School of Real Estate.
Sorry, we're just finding out.
Yeah.
Is this the same submission as this one, though?
Yes.
Oh,
If
okay.
it's easier for you to look at the other
Okay,
one.
it's the same thing.
It's different.
I'm looking on it.
So
It's the same.
where it's the same. So whichever one you want to follow. Okay. So what the text does is it details what all the attachments are. And again, I know that members, 2 of the members have heard this, and Mr. Lorendo, you haven't. So I'm just going to take a couple of extra minutes here to address this. So at tab 1, what we give you is excerpts from the appraisal of real estate. And the concept simply is that when somebody buys property, they're buying a future stream of income. And part of what's going to impact that future stream of income is the expenses that cannot be recovered from tenants. Many expenses can, but there are always some that cannot. Tab 2, again from the appraisal of real estate, then addresses in a more detailed way what some of those expenses are. And if you look at the bottom of page 91, it talks about various expenses, leasing commissions, for example. Over onto the next page, maintenance and repair of structure, things like that. Those are expenses that are typically not recoverable. Through the course of my presentation, I made mention of the surface parking, and we've got approximately 200,000 square feet of surface parking on this site. As I've said to you, there's concrete underneath the building, which is 150,000 square feet approximately. It has no rebar in it. It's going to heave. There's no question it's going to heave. It's going to have to be repaired. The city allows a $3 expense for asphalt. Concrete is more expensive, but there's going to be concrete costs that are going to be incurred. If we go to tab 3, tab 3 is an excerpt from the Sauder School of Business, which is the real estate division at the University of British Columbia. And on to page 102 at the bottom, you can see a reference to leasing and capital costs, non-recoverable expenses, and again, simply to establish that these expenses are taken into account by investors. Then, tab 4, we've got the City of Winnipeg 1994 General Reassessment Manual. Because I'm old and been doing this for a long time, I actually have this manual on my shelf. And at page 107 at the bottom, it talks about non-recoverable expenses. And let me just mention something. The department has explained that the removal of the 5% on this cycle was a function of their view that the 5% was intended to represent what I will call true third-party management costs. If I hire colliers to manage a property, they're going to charge typically 5%, and the view of the city was that under most leases, that is being recovered from tenants, and therefore the landlord should not get a deduction for an expense. Going back as far as 1994, and that's what page 107 speaks to, you can see the heading management, item number 1, reflects expenses incurred by the landlord are not recoverable from tenants, even with net leases. And they give examples of processing payment and chasing bad debts. My point simply is that back then, and continuing for many cycles thereafter, the city treated management as a form of non-recoverable expense, and in deciding that they were going to eliminate that additional 5% on this cycle, effectively what they are doing is they are no longer allowing enough non-recoverable expense. Tab 5 is a repetition of City of Winnipeg manuals for subsequent years, all to the same effect as the 1994 manual. Tab 6, here's where we come to other assessing authorities. So tab 6 is the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. It is the assessor for the province of Saskatchewan, and just a couple of things I want to point out there. If you look at page 127, you see an example, and I stress it's an example of determining net operating income and the use of an 8% allowance in this example for purposes of determining the net operating income. So again, it is entirely appropriate. Turn back to page 125 at the bottom. You've got a heading right at the bottom, non-recoverable operating expenses, typically not included in a lease, legal and audit, structural repairs, advertising and promotion, leasing commissions. So these are all expenses that are appropriate to make part of the non-recoverable allowance. Tab 7, to similar effect, is MPAC. MPAC is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. It is the Ontario Assessing Authority. The same effect as the last tab I have showed you. And again, by way of example, on page 132 in figure 3.3, there's an example of a 5% allowance on account of non-recoverable expenses. Again, just to give you examples of what other assessing authorities have done. Tab 8 is a couple of decisions of the municipal board. I won't speak to those at the moment. Tab 9 is a study I did of expenses for various types of properties, and the conclusion was, there were 17 properties here, the conclusion was that when you narrowed it down to the 8 properties, you got a range of 4 to 8%. So that is the non-recoverable submission. Again, many of you have heard it before. The point I want to make through all this is this building with its 150,000 square feet of roof, this building with its 200,000 square feet of parking, all the structural issues that every building has, all the legal issues, all the audit issues, all the other expenses that every other property normally has, the assessor's 2% allowance here is $42,000. $42,000 is not enough for a property of this size. As I said to you, at $12 a square foot, that roof of 150,000 square feet is going to cost $1.8 million. If you amortize that over 25 years, ignoring interest, that's $72,000. We've already exceeded the assessor's allowance. Now let's add in parking. Even if I add in asphalt at $3 a square foot for the space underneath the building only, that's $450,000. Use a 20-year amortization on that. That's $22,500. I'm already at $95,000. Never mind legal, never mind audit, never mind normal structural, never mind all of that. The $42,000 is nowhere near enough. That's the point to be made through all this. Coming back into the main brief, so on the capitalization rate, so now I'm at page 29. If a typical RWC building gets 6.15%, and I don't know that it does, but if it did, I would say to you that some premiums have got to be added to this property for the risk associated with the nature of this property. Let's start with the second floor design, inadequate floor load, inefficient configuration. Remember that in our 150,000 square feet is over 16,000 square feet of common area that is devoted now to creating safety measures to allow exiting of the building. Then the whole retail risk that has arisen, the migration which I addressed earlier to the Seasons of Tuxedo area, the closures, the vacancy, all of that, and I'm going to circle back a little bit more on the vacancy issues, and in fact, let's do that now. Let's go to the appendix, and let me start turning some pages in the appendix. About 5 tabs in, the tab says Sears in Shambles.
Yeah.
So again, I've told you that Sears closed, but here's a story about the chaos that was going on in the Sears stores as they were closing in Winnipeg, and again, simply to establish that they were closing. The next tab, page 29, is about Cabela's and the fact that they're going to smaller format stores. Turning the pages to page 30, here is some mapping and information about the Seasons of Tuxedo. And in the lower left-hand corner, with the page in a portrait position still, you see the purple areas. Those are that's apartment development. There's a huge amount of apartment development that has happened out around this site. And as I've said to you, an attempt is being made to achieve the same thing in the Polo Park area with the airport objecting. The point is simply that there is a migration of retail that is happening away from the St. James area, is going south into the Seasons area, and even the Seasons development has already experienced closures and failures of stores, pointing simply to the ongoing difficulties that retail in a general sense is experiencing. The next tab, page 45, it's called the Amazon effect, and really what it's intended to convey is the impact that online retailing is having for all sorts of retailers. And what this does is it explains the struggles that retailers are having to fill vacancies. You've got Loblaws becoming concerned that suddenly online shopping will extend to food. Lots of defaults in the retail field, and this section of the brief speaks about it to a significant extent. And if you jump to page 63, what you've got at page 63 is a newspaper article. That gentleman is a fellow named Ed Sonshine. He is the chief executive officer of RioCan REIT, one of the largest shopping center REITs in Canada, if not the largest, active in the United States as well. And they are downsizing, they are selling properties, and they are changing them from shopping centers into mixed-use developments because the demand for retail has fallen away badly. The next tab is called ONO Decision and Order. This is here simply to address the vacancy. Sometimes I hear from assessors that there's a limit to what they can do in terms of vacancy. I've heard 25%. Here's a municipal board decision that allowed 35%. We've only selected 20% in this case, more than reasonable, as I've told you. We've been through the next tab, which is the non-recoverable expense submission. And then I want to address by way of rebuttal. So we have rebuttal, and I have the copies here to distribute. And these address primarily the assessor's rental comparables, just so we can understand what they are. I'll be quick on this.
I don't believe you, Mark.
So what we've done is page number 1 is simply, that's the assessor's comparable chart. It's all the assessor's comparables. And then what we're doing is we're giving you a series of photos of these various locations so you can understand where they are. So Ashley, at the corner of Ellis and St. James, at grade obviously, smaller, and the assessor's rent is $12. 810 St. James, page 3, that's the Best Buy. That's the Best Buy located across from Polo Park along St. James, 695 Empress, the Chapters bookstore. Very unique facility in the sense that if you've been in there, there's a very significant, I'm going to call it mezzanine area, but it's a full ceiling height mezzanine area where the restaurant is, and a lot of the books are up there as well. Very uniquely developed, and very doubtful whether there would be demand for that space by others. 947 St. James, another example of what's happened to retail. So the green band, sign band, is the Dollar Tree, but the space adjacent to it used to be the Staples. Staples is gone. It's got Spirit of Halloween in it occasionally throughout the year, and that space has remained vacant. The 600 Empress space, Marshalls, on page 6, turnkey space with the landlord paying for absolutely everything, and accordingly that's built into the rent. At grade again, much smaller than the subject. 1450 Ellis on page 7. This used to be the Sears home site, and it then got subdivided into Staples and Giant Tiger. Again, at grade level loading, much smaller through these two spaces than the subject. 710 St. James, the Hudson Bay Home Outfitters store at page 8, actually now dark, and dark for a little while now. But again, a huge visibility along St. James. And then 600 Empress, page 9. That was the Bed Bath & Beyond space. Again, almost immediately adjacent to Polo Park, turnkey space. But what they didn't use here in terms of comparable space is the second floor space for Western Financial, which was office space, which leased at $14.75 a square foot. That would be more comparable space, I would suggest, to the subject because it is at a second floor level. And then, just continuing here, some shopping center definitions, but also when we get to page 15, the history of this property in terms of these appeals. And, you know, it's interesting how the value on this property has bounced around. The 2018 assessment initially proposed at $22,979,000 on page 15. You can see on page 18 that used a 25% capitalization rate, and that's what I was asking the assessor about. We didn't pick it. The assessor picked the 25% capitalization rate. Vacancy. So 25% vacancy selected by the assessor with a 6.5 cap at April 1 of 16. Here we are 2 years later at April 1 of 18, and 2 years more vacancy, and the capitalization rate is going down, which doesn't make sense. And then ultimately you can see that on page 19, the assessor made a recommendation on the original 2018 assessment, reducing the rent to $12.50 and bringing the value to $16,862,000. An esteemed panel of this board, and then on page 20, rendered a decision at $10,447,000, under appeal, of course. Then page 21, was the supplementary assessment for 2018 and 2019 at $31,707,000. So for 2016, the assessor says initially it's $22 million, recommends $16 million. For 2018-19 supplementary, it comes out at $31 million, and with a 2% vacancy, and the board in that case at page 24 determined that it would go with $17 million. So where does that leave us at the end of the day? You've got some decisions to make. One of the decisions you need to make is what is the appropriate gross potential income. We are $400,000 apart, as I've told you, in that regard. And I think we've been very generous in the rents we've used in getting to that number. On the issue of vacancy, the assessors used a 10%. We are at 20%. Considering the building was 100% vacant for 3 continuous years, arguably we could have been much higher, but I think we've been very reasonable from that perspective as well. The expenses, the assessors at 2%, $42,000. We've gone to a total of 7%, and of course that brings up the allowance to a total of $108,000 compared to the assessor's $42,000. And again, our value is found on page 7 of our main brief. And then you've got a capitalization rate decision to make, where the assessor's at 6.15, we are at 8, and those are the decisions you're going to have to make. If you'll give me just one moment, I may be done. I am done.
Thank you.
No, I'm good.
Mr. Laurando?
I guess most of your, when you're talking about the 5%, the Saskatchewan model and I do believe the Ontario model, wasn't only the 5%, but you kept talking about roof replacement.
Yes.
You don't mark it into your workup.
So what we
Because
did...
can I finish my question?
I'm sorry.
So, because you're saying it's greater than the amount of the 5%. But should that not be added in, the way like Saskatchewan says to add it in and advertise it over that period of the life of that roof? So should that not be added in, according to what's in your report?
So
I mean, this is your information.
So what we've done is we're telling you that there's 150,000 square feet of roof
Yeah.
at $12 a square foot, $1.8 million, amortize it over 25 years, ignore interest, $72,000.
And where do you have that?
I have it through my questions of the assessor. It's not laid out in that way in the brief.
But it's also not in your evaluation.
Well, it's in our valuation in the sense that if you look at page 7 of the valuation, what you see is an allowance of between the 5% and the 2% of $108,000, almost $109,000. So you see the non-recoverable
Yep,
5% and the 2% of it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying to you is, okay, what's going to go into that? What's going to go into that are things like leasing commissions, roof replacement, pavement replacement, legal, audit, normal structural repairs. All of those things will end up in that $108,000 allowance. And then I give you examples by explaining to you 150,000 square feet of roof at $12 a square foot, $1.8 million, amortized over 25 years, ignoring interest, $72,000. That exceeds the assessor's $42,000 by $30,000 already. Then we get to the paving, then we get to the structural, then we get to the legal, then we get to the audit. The point simply is that I can easily get to the $108,000 through these things I've just itemized to you, and that's why the $108,000 allowance is reasonable. Mr. Schindelman will say to me, don't give away my interest on the money I'm going to have to spend. Don't ignore it in what you're saying to Mr. Laurendeau at the moment. But the point I'm making simply is that I get there easily without factoring in interest. If I now have to start to factor in interest, the number just goes up, of course.
So you're disagreeing with them cutting off the 5%,
Yes.
but you don't think it should be higher than 5%?
Well,
Are you not throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Should you not go for the whole gambit and say this is our number that the actual costs are? If they don't want a percentage, why aren't you going for using the actuals?
So part of the reason is that, and you know, I have had assessors say this to me, indeed I've had panel members say this to me. Look at your financial statements, you didn't spend any money in this year.
Yeah.
And my answer to that is that these non-recoverables are intended to address the economic life of the building and the life cycle of the various components that make up the building. A roof has a life cycle. Let's call it 25 years.
Yeah.
Not the roof that's on this building right now, but a normal roof, well constructed. Paving, let's call it 20 years. Not this paving under the building with no rebar, but paving properly constructed. Everything has its life cycle, and everything will need to be replaced. And sophisticated investors, like the people sitting beside me, understand that and factor that into what they do. So I can't say to you that I need, what I'm saying to you is I need to take into account the economic life of the building, the life cycle of the components, and I need to amortize that over the life of the building. And that's why I believe the allowance of approximately $108,000 is a reasonable approach to the matter. You may be saying to me, but you don't have enough. That may be, but this is where we're at.
Well, no, your information is telling me that you don't have enough.
Well, and I hear what you're saying, because you're looking at Saskatchewan, for example, where they used 8%. I understand what you're saying, but this is what we are presenting.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, that was a very comprehensive presentation, so I don't have a lot of questions. I think you've covered all your points. You know, to the point about retail, and particularly in that area of the city, is this space perhaps more suited to something else other than retail? Like you have a call center in there.
Winners doesn't pay any rent. They want a retailer beside them. That was their motivation for moving from their $10 flat grade space at 1320 Ellis. We thought we could get them a furniture store. We offered it to the furniture store for free so that we could get Winners to pay rent. We didn't do a deal. We thought we were going to do a deal. We anticipated that we were going to do a deal. So we don't get any rent from Winners. We only get rent from 24/7. And we can't subdivide the space any further with the fire code and basically the layout of the space. And we have tried coast to coast. Every Cadillac Fairview leasing agent is on it. We've tried everything. We tried moving a tenant from, we tried the sport check. We tried the sport check on it, $8 a foot. They wouldn't go upstairs. We have a real problem. And that's
Well, I guess the question was, is it maybe more suited to non-retail tenants, I guess?
right, but if we put, you can't have windows in the middle. It's the middle bay. 24/7 takes up the parking that an office user would use.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conundrum. We could put, we can't put another call center in, which is the only use because of the exclusivity of 24/7. And we couldn't expand them because that would give Winners an out. And right now they're being part of the operating expenses. And it was a turnkey. I built everything in there.
Yeah, the interior, yes. Yeah. Yeah, okay, that was just all my question. Just, this is classified as retail, and I'm just wondering if maybe.
It's probably shouldn't be.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
So, my colleagues have heard this property, I believe a couple of years ago, I saw their names. So this is new to me. So I see a sale of $9.9 million in 2013,
Yes.
and that's when you purchased the property?
No, so that was when we sold it to Target as bare land for them to develop. And that transaction was actually tied to a payment that they got to move out of the Polo Park Shopping Center. So it really isn't a proper valuation, because part of what they overpaid for this land with the view that Cadillac Fairview really wanted them out of the mall. And so you can't just take that as
They
a...
got a huge price to leave the mall so they could develop the space into expanded retail, which of course didn't work.
The old sellers. In fact, they got more than the 9.9 they paid. So that
Yeah.
it's not really it's not a fair arm's length transaction to consider standalone.
Okay.
But it was the vacant land sale,
Okay.
is the point.
Do you know how much Target paid to have that building built?
Well, we know they didn't get an occupancy permit. They had an interim only, and we didn't know that when we appealed this property the first time. The city did not inform us. I don't know what they paid, because what they paid included a lot of fixtures, and they built restaurants inside, and they had cartolators put in, which is, you can put a shopping cart on an escalator. It's called a cartolator, and it was built for $1.3 million, and we sold it for $16,000. And we took it out. So
We offered to help them a lot during the construction process as well, and they declined our expertise, and so we really weren't at all involved in their construction.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out how this building could have been built with all the issues it has. And did
So-
nobody inspect it? Sorry, I know that's not your area of expertise, Mr. Taylor, but I'm just curious.
Did I inspect the building?
No. But I mean,
Oh, like
would
the
the
building
city
inspectors?
Yes, would the city have not inspected it at some point?
I would assume so, hope so.
Well, the city inspected it and said, this building isn't properly built, we're not giving you an occupancy permit. Like, so Target, when they closed, and we're still working through an ability for the city to say you can permanently occupy this building. But then they closed, and those issues weren't addressed. We had to address them at a huge cost as part of the demise that happened post-reference.
Okay.
But maybe let me help you with your question. I don't think the problems here with the roof, for example, with the lack of reinforcing steel and concrete underneath the building, I don't think those are code issues per se. Those are quality of construction issues. If you decide you want to repave your driveway and put no reinforcing steel in, you can do it. You'll save money doing it. Your driveway won't last, but you can do it. So it's not a code issue in the sense that it's the city's obligation to say, you can't build this way, but it's good construction practice. It's how you decide you're going to build your building.
the mistakes they made are much longer than we also gave them a right to control the rest of the land, because they were going to be the anchor. They were going to be the Target store.
Right.
They could have sold that building to somebody else, and we would have preferred that they sold it to somebody else. But with that, got the rights to control the rest of the land that is not part of this. We had to buy back the right to develop on the rest of the land, which we unfortunately couldn't do.
Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have bought the building.
We wouldn't have bought the building, because it had this inherent right to control no pharmacy over 1,000 feet. So no.
The building locations specification we could only build here. So really, if we wouldn't have granted those sort of anchor rights to Target, we wouldn't be sitting here because somebody else would have bought it. Like it's not. We bought a real problem.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. And I think we're just going to take a 5-minute break.
That would be a great idea. But I didn't never hear of that company.
United States, yeah, that's source of
I'll stick with my Caterpillar shares.
Caterpillar.
Good dividend.
Okay, I'm going to call this hearing back to order, and we are going to hear 1250 J Street. Mr. Taylor.
File number 07-001-500-100. File number is 19-3091. Proposed 2020 assessed value is $6,624,000. Built in 1999. Leasable area we're looking at today is 46,711 square feet. 2 tenants in the building. The subject property is on page 2. Rental comparables on page 3 just for larger format retail in the area. Page 4 shows the model-driven income workup as a retail warehouse. So model rents again $951 and $954. Vacancy at 4%. Expenses being 2%, shortfall $6, and a cap rate at 6.15%. Flipping to page 7, you see the subject property aerial photographs. So essentially one unit is the brick furniture center and the other one is the flying squirrel trampoline place. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes. Did you say this is all model-driven, all of the parameters? So the 4% vacancy, did you consider that it had been vacant for at least 4 years prior?
It was vacant until I think June of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't consider that?
No.
And the capitalization rate is model-driven.
Yep.
So as a, well, there is
It's not
no
on
retail
there.
warehouse class, but, so at 6.15, you think it's the best retail warehouse building, again?
No. That's the same we just looked at.
Sorry?
The last part we just looked at also had 6.15% retail. So I would say it's the best.
But you gave it one of the best overall cap rates.
We don't have a chart suggesting a range for a retail warehouse.
Okay, so what is your evidence for the 615?
We don't have that on the table.
Oh, okay. On page 7, looking at your aerials, would you suggest that there's enough parking as a retail warehouse use?
Nope.
No?
There's not a lot of parking.
That's all.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Orlando?
I guess I'll touch on that last question. The land planned area is 2.9.
Yep.
Any of your comparables that low?
So 2 to 1.
Yeah.
In the rental comparables?
Yeah. I think any of them have that.
I don't believe they would. Usually you'd see larger. The only one I could think of would just be speculating. So I would suggest that. But we are using a model of rent that's lower than all my comparables also.
But then, would that not affect the overall cap rate?
Land to value ratio is not built into the cap rate.
Okay. Height of the ceilings are
26.
good.
So I'm just on page 7, and I'm just looking at this. So, does the brick have retail here, or is it just a warehouse for them?
It's a clearance center.
Their clearance center. Okay, yeah. So I know that's not their main store. So I was okay. And then and you on your page 2, those are the actual net rents, and then the model has come out a little lower. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
And I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Page 1 is just an overview of the assessment over the last 2 cycles. It was $5,754,000 in 2018 and $6,624,000 in 2020. Page 2 is the income valuation. I'll just go quickly through the items that were not in dispute with the assessment department at the rents used by the assessor, 952. We have used a higher vacancy because this property has had a history of vacancy. You can see that if you look on pages 6, 7, and 8 on the income statements, you can see that the property rental revenue shows that it was not fully leased through those 3 years and another year as well. We've used 7%. The shortfall of $6 is in accordance with the assessment department, and again, we've used the non-recoverable of 5% and other of 2% for basically what Mark said. But if we even look at the roof on this particular building at 46,000 feet, that would amortize to about $22,000 per year over 25 years, as an example. And the cap rate, we've adjusted the cap rate to 6.25. This is kind of not really a retail warehouse. It's not industrial. It's somewhere in between. There's not enough parking for a retail warehouse. The land and building ratio is not high enough and would definitely affect the cap rate. And so 6.25, a small adjustment was used in this valuation. There's not enough parking. The loading is not at dock level, and it can't, the flying squirrel type tenant has had little history of operation. Not sure how long it's going to be. We know that the Sky Zone has recently closed. I think down the street there's a kid something on Ellis, or on Century. 801 Century. So, I mean, there is some competition there. Not sure, again, the longevity of this particular tenant. So for that reason, we have increased the cap rate to 6.25, which is, again, still very reasonable for this property. Our comparables on page 3 support the rent in the $9 range. This is the vacancy analysis for the 4 years, 2014 to 2017, 26% for 3 years, and then 23%. We use 7% vacancy. If I was to take the total of these 4 years of vacancy and amortize that over, say, 10 years of the building, the vacancy would be 10% per year. We've used 7. Again, we've agreed with the shortfall. The non-recoverable analysis, again, we've gone through that extensively today. And like I said, on the income statements on pages 6, 7, and 8, you can see that in 2015, just to explain how these financial statements work, because I understand that there's been some confusion with the assessment department. Recoveries, the $145,000 is what we've collected from the tenants. The recoverable expenses at $218 is what we've paid. So you can see that there's more than $70,000 that was not recovered. So that's an example on page 6, and similarly on page 7, $150,000 was collected from the tenants, and the owner wasn't paid $222,000 for operating expenses. So again, there's the shortfall there of gained 70,000. And in 2017, there is recoveries of 147,000 from the tenants, and recoverable expenses cost 217,000, so again, another 70,000. The bottom section, leasing and marketing, professional fees and repairs and maintenance, none of that was recovered, so that was an additional about 300,000 that was not recovered. Again, some of that was to get the building ready for the new tenant. But you can see that even with the actual operating expenses, more than $70,000 was not covered in those 3 years of just operating expenses. So that's why we need to include the 5% in the valuation, as any educated investor would do. We talked about the capitalization rate. This is of a size that is difficult to lease. We've discovered that with larger box retail warehouse. We talked about the Amazon effect and how that's affecting things. And it was determined by that the second space was not leased to a retail type tenant. It was leased to a trampoline tenant, whatever that is. We talked about the parking again, and the parked and the loading. And for this reason, the cap rate is 625. That is why we've come to a value of $5,840,000, and I believe that's my submission.
And just to anticipate one of the questions, there's subject sale history here from January 2014. In our view, the owner overpaid, and he did so for 2 reasons. One, his intention was to operate. He has a computer business, so he was buying the space not thinking it would be market rent, but to buy it to operate within it as really an owner-operator and a half. And the second issue was when he bought it from a related company to the then furniture store that was operating where the Brick is now. And it turned out when the Brick actually purchased that company, they said, you know what, we actually don't need to pay rent on the loading dock. It's covered, but so it looks like it's part of the building, but the Brick said, you know, this isn't something we pay rent on. And so ultimately the owner had to come to an arrangement with the Brick that he wasn't anticipating when he purchased it for $6.5 million. So for those 2 reasons, that subject sale history really isn't a good representation of the actual value of the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Just a couple, because you started talking, so I should ask you what the sale or Sandy or Justin? Okay. Because we're not using the loading dock area today, the leasable area, correct?
No.
No, so that's not in there. And you guys didn't represent this property last cycle. I had it with all this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And Altus is still using the sale as a cap rate comparable in their study.
Okay. Oh, we didn't tell them to.
You guys haven't talked to them at all. You might have since you guys took it over from them. And you don't know anything about the 2018 appeal then? That you've listed on page 1, I guess, of your...
What?
We know the value.
You just know the value, that's it?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just wondering if you had any more details, if you talked to them about any of their stuff.
We managed the building.
Yeah. You managed it back then too, like all these income statements, right? Yeah. And so we Justin one more. So he bought it to occupy it himself, then changed his mind?
Yeah.
So he didn't buy it for cap rate purposes at all?
It's fair to say he bought half of it on income and then half to operate. So it's not to say he didn't factor some of that in, but it's not a pure cap rate purchase.
Yeah, and I went over this. It was a different panel back in 2018, but so the Brick warehouse, that's just a bulk rent at $10. Essentially, because it was United Furniture Warehouse, so it was affiliated with the Brick, so it's really not.
They bought United Furniture.
Yeah.
And United Furniture built the building.
So the lease originally was like the owner of United Furniture, John Paul.
Yeah. So it's not arm's length.
It wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
No questions?
No, I don't have any questions either, I don't think.
And I don't either. So,
You're simple that one?
Thank you.
Call it to an end. closing the meeting, Madam Chair?
Yes, and this hearing is concluded.
Do you have towing service